Hello. Welcome to the Wilmington Presbyterian Church Bicentennial Celebration. Our church's faith journey began in 1823, which makes us 200 years old this year. This church existed in a few different buildings over the past 2 centuries. In this video, members of the congregation share several memories of the Mulberry Street Church, in which we worshiped from 1891 to 1965. That building was downtown near the General Denver Hotel. A parking lot now sits where that building once stood. You'll also hear about the Randolph Street Church, which we built in 1965 and worshiped in until the year 2000. We'll mention some of the reasons for moving there and some of the unique opportunities that building presented. We hope you enjoy these stories of our previous church buildings and what made those buildings and our time in them so special.
Well, mine is on Mulberry Street because I think I was just a small fry, 2 or 3 years old, and Mrs. James used to say I'd walk under the tables all the time. She'd have to look for me under tables. But I remember distinctly the smell of that basement. And it was wet, like moldy, but donuts and coffee. You put that all together, it was very, very warm to me.
Yes.
It was a wonderful smell.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. And I remember we used to come in that side door off Mulberry, and the part of the choir would gather there. And while Sandy said, no, I think your memory's wrong, but I remember on maybe a special occasion, I don't recall, but the choir members marched into Onward Christian Soldiers and came in down both aisles and up into the choir loft. And I remember that pretty distinctly, but Sandy said she didn't recall it, but I could be making it up. Who knows? I don't know. But that was my earliest memory anyway.
Yeah.
She and I went over here to the Presbyterian Church, in the old stone church is what it was. Well, that's where the Presbyterian Church was, a great big old, Bruce probably remembers.
It's before I came to Wilmington.
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh,
But
you guys are youngsters.
that's right.
Well, when we went there, I think it probably could have been 100 years old. It was very old anyway, because everything about it was needing repaired and all.
Well, I know that this is where I met Roger, at the old church uptown, and I was introduced to him by Court Hall in December of '62, and we were married September of '63, and met him right at the very center at the table at the what's that called, communion table.
Oh,
That's Court said, listen, he's the newest bachelor. And so we hit it off, and he worked for DPNL, and we got married.
yeah. So you've seen 3 church buildings in your experience.
Yes, because my parents were members, Herbert and Louise Doak, and they were members, and I was born with my 2 brothers, and we lived in the church.
I think of all 3 churches that I know of.
The buildings?
We've been in 4 buildings, if I remember right, but I can think of 3. And the one at the corner, which is now a parking lot, at the corner of Mulberry and Locust. That church sat on a hill, and our house was at the bottom of that hill. And my parents moved into that house. I think I was going maybe in the 5th grade, so whatever year that would be, and we just walk up to. I can remember Reverend Kaler at the time and there was a hillside with a concrete wall, so it was like a ledge you could sit on, and I remember seeing him sit there smoking his pipe as we're coming into church, but you could walk into the basement off that street, and you go up the hill and you could walk into the main floor. It's just the way the church sat was unusual. In the old church, when John Morris came as a minister, and they were moving up, and it didn't take long to unpack their van when they moved into the manse. We had the church manse right beside which sat right on that alley coming down onto Mulberry Street, and the church owned that property. on the outside, it looked like a great home. I'm not so sure it was solid on the inside, but it was a good start, you know.
Tell me about the organ at the old church.
Oh, that was a piece, wasn't it, Jim? It had bellows in it, and the bellows would get holes in them. And if you didn't get air in that, it wouldn't play. So I remember when Sander got married, Taylor Spare went back and he would hold his fingers over the hole so the organ would play. But it was just a two-manual, old pipe organ.
Yeah.
So
Was it difficult to play other than?
it wasn't like the new modern ones, but I enjoyed playing. And it was difficult because I sat facing the wall and I had a mirror, so I had to look out. So
If you've ever been in the Baptist church on Main Street in Walnut, across from the Methodist church, our church was a little bit larger than that, but it was built similar. Whereas the sanctuary went down, it was kind of a slow, gradual downward to the pulpit area. And then in our case, the choir sat behind where the minister was, and they were elevated behind the minister. And then kind of on that area, the area we had Sunday school. The word I'm trying to come up with. We had Sunday school. That room could be closed off for just Sunday school, or could be opened up for if you needed more chairs for the church service that we had going on. But there were a lot of neat things going on there too.
Yeah.
We were there for quite a while.
Yeah.
Both my sisters were married in the church on Randolph, and there were just a lot of baptisms and things like that in our family. It happened mostly in that church. A lot of good times there as well. And that, as you know, I mean, that church was built to be added on to later. That was
Right.
The idea of building the church was it was a temporary facility, and we were going to eventually build a sanctuary and those other things. And then when it came time to do that, and the need was there, the building was not in such a situation that it was cost effective to do it that way.
Right.
And so then we moved to the church we're in now.
My childhood church times were in a Catholic church, so I was used to a much more rigid atmosphere. So it was kind of refreshing with all the gabbing going on before church and after church. It was wonderful. It was just fun. And it amazes me that there are so many different kinds of workforce people. That there are teachers and nurses and doctors and lawyers and everything. Although that might just be because I was old enough to understand what that was, but I really appreciated all the variety of people in this church.
Have any memories of
of when the church moved from downtown to Randolph Street?
I just remember we had a lot of water problems with the old church, and it was going to cost a lot of money. And I was little. I had to be, I don't know. I was pretty young. I guess I was old enough to be married, but I was young in the in not married and all. And it was just going to cost them a lot of money. The roof leaked and the sides were holding water, and the basement was not a good basement.
In 1965, the old church was down at the corner right across the street from the Friends Church in Caddy Corner across from St. Columkill. And the church was in bad shape. In fact, even by the standards at the time, it was probably illegal. But the leadership of the church finally decided, let's do something else. And so the decision was made to go out to Randolph Street. And that was a relatively easy decision to make. And Esther Janes told me it was remarkable that that was one of those times that the vote was basically unanimous to make the change. Now, the deal was this. In 1965, the denomination had some money for building new churches. They called them new church developments. So our church got some money. We had some money saved, but we didn't have enough money to build a whole new church. So what we did, and many of you remember the church at Randolph Street, we built basically a big fellowship hall with 4 Sunday school rooms on each side. I say we, I wasn't there yet. But at any rate, it had a nice kitchen, really nice fellowship hall, offices, a great entryway. And we thought that this is going to work well until the church grows, and then we'll build a sanctuary out in the baseball diamond area. Well, that never happened. We didn't have enough money to build a real sanctuary, and so in 1979, we converted the present building, we converted that social hall to a sanctuary. We left the 4 Sunday school rooms on the south side, but on the north side, we took 2 of those Sunday school rooms, converted them into fellowship hall. All that worked great for, another 20 years or so. In that time, the church grew in terms of its own members, and we were stretching at the seams. You can see a good indication of that in the hallway where you have those 2 pictures, the one old picture with everybody out in front, and the newer picture. You can get an idea that we needed more space. We needed more space for worship, but the other thing, we needed more space for community activities, because the Wilmington Presbyterian Church had been intent to be a community church, not just for us, but for the community.
Well, John Morris was the pastor at that stone church.
Yes.
Now, tell me a little bit, was he the pastor when you guys moved over to Randolph?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that move that you guys made. What made the decision to go to Randolph?
Well, of course, there was a lot of discussion whether they should or should not build the church. They didn't know if they'd get the money in one thing or another. And somehow it all came together, and we moved over there. The man that owned that ground was the name of Grant, and he lived out in the country here, and he owned a lot of ground, and I think he either gave or sold that ground to the Presbyterian, and and John's house was first house down over that gully and up the hill. That's where the minister lived. The church provided that too.
Was Randolph Street built for this church, or was it another building that was adapted?
Great question. Yeah, it was built.
It was built.
Here's the way, when they decided in 1965 that they needed someplace else, the building committee thought, well, we need to go where there's growth. And so the growth area was Randolph Street. And they said, we'll target that, and bought the land at Randolph Street. Had enough pledges and money to build what would be the first of a 2-phase project. And that was a fellowship hall that had, it was more than the fellowship hall. It was that big rectangular building. At the east end were the pastor's office and the secretary's office and the boiler for the heat. And then you had that center fellowship hall that functioned as a sanctuary. It was huge. And then on each side, there were 4 Sunday school classrooms and a kitchen. So, before I came, the church realized that there was not going to be enough money to go to the next phase and build the sanctuary. And they were struggling with what to do. And Fayeanne's aunt, Julia Grantham Martin, had donated X amount of money toward that new project for a new organ. And we were on the verge of losing her contribution, because she said, and whatever we didn't spend for the organ, we could use for the new building. And I didn't, I'm a farm kid. I have no idea about this stuff. Jim Miller, our lawyer, came and he said, look, I got this letter and we got to move on getting this organ or we're going to lose this money. And we were partially funding the operating budget on the interest of that money. We weren't touching the principal. So we realized there's no way we can do a new building or a new sanctuary. So we decided we would remodel the sanctuary, and this would be about 79, 80,
79, 80, yeah.
Margaret Stuckey chaired this remodeling committee. She just did a remarkable job. She was probably 85 at the time. Perfect choice. And so what we did is we took what was the fellowship hall that also functioned as sanctuary. We converted it, or folding chairs, we converted it to permanent sanctuary. Pews, the whole works. The chancel area we've just been talking about.
I had some very pleasant memories there. My daughter got married at the one on Randolph Street, and then after we moved here, I've had 3 grandchildren that have been married in this church. So
You got a lot of happy memories in terms of weddings.
Lots of them, yes, yes. So
My sister and I got married on Randolph, and it was very nice. It was a pretty place to have a wedding, actually, with the outside, because we had the greeting line outside, and of course we went to Elks for mine. Jackie had her party after there in the church, but yeah, I thought it was really pleasant to have it there. It was nice. Yeah. It was nice. It was small.
It was small.
Sitting on chairs, and
it became too small.
But it was, it was packed all the time.
Yeah, it was packed all the time.
David was well loved. Yeah.
I think, I believe John Morris was there.
Yes.
When we started going.
He did. He moved into the manse on Mulberry Street. Mother and Dad remember helping them move in.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't long after that we decided to get a new church. And so then John was there for, 65 on, and then David showed up, and was he a co-pastor or children's pastor?
For here?
For David, no, at the other church, Randolph.
He was, I think, a youth pastor.
Yeah, I think so too, for a couple of years anyway.
Yeah.
And then John went on and he became the pastor, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Yeah.
John Morris,
Yeah.
He had Clifford. He asked Clifford to close up the church.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Where was he? He said he had a meeting to go to. Where was the meeting?
It was a wedding.
The wedding?
It was at a wedding. And the wedding was over, and people were leaving, and he came up to me, and he didn't know me from Adam, because I didn't belong to the church.
Yeah.
And she was the only one going over there. And he came up to me, and he threw me the keys to the church and said, after everybody leaves, would you lock the church up? And he said, I have an important meeting to go to. And he said, I can't be here. So he said, you just lock it up. And so I did, and everything. Come to find out, he went to a big party out the Elks.
It was in the paper.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was John for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I came from Cincinnati in the late 70s, probably about, maybe 75. Wanted to get away, own a little bit of property and stretch out a little bit. Anyway, my husband had worked with a friend who said, if you're moving to Wilmington, be sure and look for my brother, because he's also a Presbyterian. So we didn't really know a lot about Wilmington, but we had a couple of friends and had been to the lake, and so this is where we wanted to try. So when we got up here, I remember the first Sunday that my family went to church. This was on Randolph, and Barb Hassler was there to greet us, recognized us as new people right away, and I just felt so warm about the welcome that we got. We hadn't moved very much in our family life, and so this was all kind of new. Felt good. So she showed us where the classes should be for the children that we had, And it wasn't very long that I saw somebody that looked just like our friend in Cincinnati. And it was his brother. and it was Frank Shaw,
Oh.
and who became a really good friend, of course, you know.